Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Hello, Kavya. Okay, let's start. Um, so hopefully everyone had a good week. Uh, I'm going to start with going over our DevoWorm meeting, and I think this coming Friday I'm going to try to target for the first open source meeting of the year. So this will be May 1st at 12 p.m. Eastern Time in North America. So that whatever time that is for you. And so we're going to try to, I think by then we'll have our selections for Google Summer of Code. We'll have some other things going. So hopefully we'll be able to do a meeting this week. We'll see. And so if you're interested in presenting, you can present. If you're interested in attending, please look in our Slack for more information about the link. It's usually at this link. So you have the link. Okay. So let's start with talking about the DevoWorm meeting. And so we started off with Barshan, and he was presenting on his project. This is taking what is called the EPIC data set. It's a data set in C. elegans development. It's a cell tracking data set. And he's pre-processing the data so that it can fit into this SGL pipeline. So he basically wants to create graph tensors for embryos and then feed that into a graph neural network. And so this is the pipeline here where you have the raw data in a CSV file. You have this data processing step which extracts features, generates a mask, constructs edges, and then you have the data plus the mask and the edges, and that's your output. And then you pass the processed data to this SGL graph neural network training step. That's where you train the model and then optimize the weights. So he was showing some examples of this. He was talking about how we want to be able to create spatiotemporal graph tensors. And why would you want to do that? So basically, we have time varying cell features and labels. So from the labels, we can infer directed edges to the graph. And the time varying cell features means that it needs to be a temporal graph. It also has spatial properties that the labels tell you exactly where the cell is in the embryo. And so you can actually trace the movement of the cell relative to other cells through that nomenclature. And so we have a number of columns here. We have a tensor, fixed tensor shape per embryo, and then we have a dynamic graph stored sparsely as edges over time. So the edges change over time, and then we can model that as a series of time points. And then, of course, there's an NPZ file which is produced, which is the feature tensor, where n is the number of cells, 5 is the number of features, and t is the number of time steps. And there's some other properties here. He shows some code. He goes through this. This is his blog post on this. Actually, he's been maintaining a blog on some of the work he's been doing. And he actually used the EPIC data set as input already and tested this out. So he's kind of stepping through how the code is written and how that all works. Okay, so that was that part of the meeting. Then Ashu gave a presentation on some data sets that she's contributed to DevoWorm. So we actually have a number of secondary data sets for developmental biology, and those are hosted in various GitHub repositories and other places in the OpenWorm Foundation, or the DevoWorm group. So the OpenWorm Foundation has its own set of data, And the DevoWorm group has data that's specialized for developmental data. So for C. elegans, we have quite a few data sets. The EPIC data set is a classic cell tracking data set. We have other data sets that we've pre-processed for gene expression, for cell biology, and then for other organisms like Drosophila and zebrafish, and even single cell organisms like diatoms. So this is all kind of available. And what Ashu was able to do is create a pre-processed data set where she's looking at what she calls as anastomoses. Or actually, this is something we've been talking about in the group, which is where you have graph structures where the nodes exchange their membership between one cluster or one community and another. So you can plot out graphs. These are dynamic graphs you can plot out, and you can examine how cells are, as you can imagine, as cells are being born and they're migrating, they belong to different groups, maybe different communities, and they switch membership eventually or occasionally. Sometimes that's because they change their identity from like a stem cell to a neuron, or sometimes they die or they divide. And so all those things have to be sort of accounted for in one of these developmental graph neural networks. And so she worked out this method for characterizing the anastomoses in these embryo graphs. So these data sets will be hosted in our GitHub repository. If you're interested, let me know. And then Utkarsh presented on his work. He's been playing around with the C302 platform, which models neurophysiology in C. elegans, and then playing around with the Cindy platform, or the Cindy G, which is where there's Cindy is a biophysics platform, and then Cindy G is like the graph version of that. And so he's trying to see what models the data the best. So he tried this combination of C302 and Cindy, and basically he found that because it's not specialized for development, it's not a very good model, at least out of the box or initially. So you have the wrong physics a lot of the time. So if you're modeling something in development, the physics aren't necessarily the same as what you find in the adult. You have this saturation problem where there are no contrasts that are developmentally interesting. In other words, if things are already mature, all the changes in development have already occurred, so we can't look at those changes, and the model's not sensitive to them. And then failure 3 is the cross-sectional design, where you have, from this he drew from the Whitvleet data set, where they have 8 different samples from across larval development in C. elegans. And it tracks the changes in synaptic connectivity across the connectome. And so if you don't have that sort of incorporated into your model, then it doesn't pick up on those developmental changes. So he tried that, and it didn't work out. So then he switched to this model that takes molecular causes into account. So he actually switched data sets. He started using this Packer data set from 2019. It's an interesting data set that does has a lot of lineage resolved gene expression data in it. So it basically allows you to model the connectome according to changes, or sensitive to changes that are happening in development. So this is a nice data set to work with. And then he's using this molecular NDP model, which is where he's kind of transforming those data into something that's amenable to machine learning. And then, this molecular model, of course, can predict things like wiring patterns, and exploring this hypergraph, which is already in the data. You just need to recover the hypergraph. and then this temporal developmental GNN, which he calls the GCRN. And this is something that is, he set this up and then showed some results from that, and then validated some of this as well. So it's some pretty good work by Utkarsh. And then I presented on some papers. I presented on 2 papers to end the meeting. The first was this paper, Markovian Dynamics for C. elegans Behavior Across Scales. And Barshan reminded me that he had presented on this in January, but I presented on this again because it fits into the second paper I was going to talk about. And this paper basically is where the authors build a model for looking at movement in C. elegans phenotypes. So, worms move around their environment, and we'd like to know some of those modes of behavior. And we'd like to take that behavior and link it to things going on in the connectome. What kinds of activity patterns occur in the connectome when we see certain behaviors as outputs. Now, C. elegans has a lot of stereotype behaviors, but they also have a lot of specialized behaviors that we don't really understand. So we can use, videos of C. elegans, and we can characterize those videos through machine or computer vision as some sort of eigenworm or some sort of high dimensional space where we can characterize different behaviors. And so they actually use a Markov model here to model the transitions between behavioral states. So you characterize the states using these eigenworms. You then take those eigenworms and you sort of figure out how they fit together into sort of these longer behavioral sequences. So the worm can move back and forth, and we understand how that's generated through the neural circuits, and we can characterize that sort of stereotype behavior through the eigenworms. And then we have this method for kind of treating those as discrete states that are connected probabilistic through this Markov chain. So that's kind of what they're doing in this paper. And so they're successful in reconstructing these behaviors. And then we go on to this paper, which is a stochastic neuronal model that predicts random search behaviors at multiple spatial scale in C. elegans. So they're using a neuronal model to predict search behaviors, which are sort of the longer term behaviors that you see in the last paper. So they're building this Markov model. They're using that to predict these longer term behaviors, these sort of behaviors we don't really understand. And it turns out a lot of those are involved in foraging behaviors. So this is what they're doing here. They're looking at foraging behaviors in C. elegans. But they actually, interestingly enough, they use a different mathematical model for this. They use a mathematical model of random search. And in the last paper, they're using a Markov model, which typically is memoryless, which means it doesn't have a memory for past states. It just gives the probabilities of the next behavioral transition or state transition. In this case, they have a memory, and they're able to kind of predict these different aspects of the circuit in the connectome, and then these different aspects of behavior. So they're able to model this as in a way that uncovers these circuits that do what they say a neuronal flip-flop, which is where there's reciprocal inhibition between two populations of stochastic neurons. And so they're able to kind of get interesting results that take a different method from the last paper, but kind of get you to the same place. And so that was the end of the meeting pretty much. All right, so that was the DevoWorm meeting. And so this week I'd like to begin the open source meetings for this year. We'll also have another DevoWorm meeting on Monday, so hopefully people can make that. It looks like Vidhi and Jesse have joined us. So, people want to give updated? Okay. People want to give updates?
Hey, I don't know how noisy it's going to be where I am, but I can speak or describe it a little bit.
Okay.
How is the? I'm in a cafe. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine.
Really quickly, just to like bullet points and things, and we'll see what else we want to say today. It's been a really interesting week and time. On the mentoring front, I'm mentoring a team that's about to do like a semi-final pitch in the VC launch startup program, and they're doing well. I just dug out, if you guys remember last year about this time, I did stuff with the MIT Venture Studio pitch day thing. And I had since kind of buried that article in Substack post. I posted this big breakdown about a year ago. And I just pulled it out again to show them, like, wow, that was actually, it was a terrible article. Like, I basically just pasted a transcript on Substack, an unedited transcript, basically, which you shouldn't do. But the content, the wisdom there is totally good and applicable. So I was looking at that again and trying to advise them what to do to get their pitch ready. And I have quite a lot of experience now, like what that kind of pitching is about. So if anybody ever wants to talk about that, I'm trying to encourage this to people in the JoPro community here in Pedagogies. Like, if you're doing that, please ask us, ask me, anyone in an advisory role, because the experience that it really, it's its very own article. Like, it's a completely different animal of talking about things. And I know we'll cover some of these things during the open source. I'm look at it. I'm trying to be I think I'll get a hacker. We'll cover some of the stuff in the open source code, like the demo or die stuff, or beyond demo or die. How do you communicate stuff, and what audience? Like, those are very key things to do. But I'm just fresh off of a version of that with a UC launch team, and it's going well. It's so interesting depending on where you are in your development as your team or your time, what kind of things to do. And then a lot of things with JoPro and DigiNest, it's the time of year, especially here on the East Coast, where all like the departments have their symposiums. So there's like the ethical computing symposium. The AHA group is having their symposium that they've made invitation only in person, and I'm a little bit bummed that I didn't get an invite to it. So sad for me. But they have a free online version, and I think it'll be pretty good. I'm looking forward to it. Last year was in person and quite big, and they had Center for Technology. It's going to be a little bit smaller this year, but they're doing a lot. And one of the things they're trying to do with JoPro is basically, one of the things this year I'm building some infrastructure to make networks of the communities of people doing this kind of interesting society ethics type work. They need a little bit better community infrastructure. So I'm realizing that that's something that I'm going to be investing in through JoPro. I'm also hoping to get JoPro to be a 501(c)(3) sponsored in some form in the next few months, which will help with some things. And a lot of DigiNest work and a lot of interns, like some interns have reached out about like data direction, interns. A few people I'm talking to next week about that. But like DigiNest has been a really interesting, I don't know, almost like commercial futures reading group style situation. We read a lot of papers by Anthropic and some Avery's personality stuff. It's been great to see Avery's finally coming along the way that I've wanted them to kind of take this stuff a bit more public, and they just made their Substack public this week. So I'm very happy for that. But now it's like entering the summer season, where people are starting to code, open source cohort. potentially a data direction intern with DigiNest stuff. That's basically like what's going on from that front of not the battleground, but the intellectual frontier that we're at here. I could comment on any of those things. I have DigiNest in particular has been meeting since like December, and we have I was about to post a full like they're not really episodes, but for the sake of the podcast culture, I have like episode 12. We've been meeting basically weekly and bi-weekly, so I have like episode 12 that's on YouTube, and I have a really great episode. I don't know. It's a discussion series to me, so it's more like sessions. But like I have all this stuff that's about to be posted, so that's part of what I'm trying to do is like get it out. Because I don't really think we've had a lot of things about that here. Also, shout out to Arna, who kind of is about to publish their final write-up, and we'll talk about that next week. I don't know if they'll be able to join us here, but Arna was the person who worked on kind of creating something that would read like ESG reports, ethical sustainability, or environmental sustainability guidelines, and like to analyze that in kind of a basic NLP way. So it was a good like intro project for them as a new person in this space. So congratulations to them for that. Congratulations to the EUC launch team, and I don't know. There's so much stuff going on. That's getting really loud here. I apologize. But there's so much stuff going on that I'm very excited for what's ahead, and I'm happy to meet and talk about. We want to have kind of any particular goals you want to hit with the summer cohort, the summer code crew, the Friday meetings, or anything else like that. So I'm going to try to weave together a few things in that front. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So that's my broad brushstrokes, and if we want to talk about that later, I'll be in a less known place. Thank you.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks for the update. Sounds like some good things going on. So did anyone else want to give an update or?
No, so actually I could not attend the last two meetings, like last 2 weekends, because I was at an hackathon. So I participated in 2 hackathons. Like in one, we built a system where we streamlined the processes of paralegal, like for the paralegal audience. So like they have to go through the people whether they can get a bail or not. For surety reduction applications, they have to create files or applications for them, align the dates for hearing. So that was what we did in the first hackathon. However, we could not actually win it. In the second one, we linked the supply chain problem. Like usually we there is data of HSM codes, but we don't have any application that links the tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, like the end supplier to the current people. So we created a graph-based system for that and added a simulation, like what if a supplier gets disrupted, so what is its blast radius, or what would happen, how would we overcome, and what are its alternatives. So we came second runner-up in that. Yeah. And for the GSOC part, I was actually looking at the Slack data sets and playing with three approaches, like what are the topics that people were discussing in the Slack community. So I applied three approaches. Well, the first one was simple LLM based one, like giving the dataset to an LLM and inferring from it. Second was a hybrid approach from LLM plus DB scan or bird topic, and third one was simple bird topic and applying LLM to just refine the labels. So I have created a PDF comparing them. So I observed that hybrid approach was much better because LLM was giving a bit more accurate answers, but it could not form clusters. So every chat it identified as unique and gave unique names. So we can't actually do that because we need to form clusters. So I found the hybrid approach much better, which was a bit accurate and more accurate, and even it formed clusters. The bird topic was not accurate at finding topics. So yeah, that was something I did.
That sounds good. So you basically the Slack data set, that's something that you were able to get like online, or is that something you generated?
Yes, there's a dataset called Chatterjee dataset, which is public. I had also shared this in the previous meeting, like where we were discussing about the GSOC approaches. So it's uh, there's this dataset called as Chatterjee dataset, which contains Slack conversation of three different communities. That is the Clojure, M, and Python dev. So yeah, from that dataset I was looking because that was publicly available on GitHub, and few research papers have also used that as a primary role. Like even for, and moreover it's disentangled, so that's where we could save some time.
Okay. And then your approaches were, or the best approach you found was like combining a large language model with a clustering model, basically.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So basically, first I gave the uh, conversations to an LLM to generalize, then applied the clustering algorithm so that they can form clusters. So that was something I did because simple LLM could not accurately form, did not form good clusters, whereas the simple clustering one did not give accurate interpretation of them.
Okay.
So I found the hybrid approach much better.
Good. That sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, Kavya. Anyone else? What about Morgan? Yeah, there he is.
So, what were the big things this week? Another open scope meeting, which is good in terms of, I think I mentioned this last week, the new data release. I haven't gotten there yet, but, this is kind of connected to what we can do to get students working with NeuroPixels data. And this is an open science project of the Allen Institute, which has it's both a rolling release. You can participate in these meetings. They're 9 a.m. Tuesday morning Pacific time. The benefit here being that they are actually in the West Coast, so their morning starts at 9. And yeah, it's a it's a great place to follow a large scientific collaboration, high level, or like people working with kind of state of the art instruments and things like that, right? Which then kind of leads into the TMS EEG. So sorry, the biggest thing this week is the spring school that's been going on, and that's the GTech spring. What do they call it? BCI and Neurotechnology School, I think. So that's actually been. Sorry, I should have led with that because it's been going on since Sunday, my time. It's been going on since Sunday midnight. because it started 9 a.m. Vienna time, and this is been just chock full of incredible speakers. I was going to say that Wednesday was some TMS EG presentations, which it was. Excuse me, both in a regular kind of TMS meeting as well as the spring school, and there's just some really nice. Been thinking a lot about EEG and you know, does consumer EEG is consumer EEG still even a thing, and why we like TMS EEG, but I can say more about that if anyone's interested. Then what I was actually working on most of the week was to get ready for Thursday's meetings, which are with our MedArc, which again are open science meetings, and focused on foundation models for both. I mean, well, the new thing with MedArc is actually a foundation model for structural MRI. And they started a new project around brain age prediction, which is of interest in psychiatry, because so much of what we're trying to characterize is sometimes described as developmental delays or developmental trajectory changes, differences, or in older adults, whether it's seen as accelerated aging. Because again, like the big thing that we always point out is that people who have these disorders are going to die 7 to 10 years younger than they should, right? So not only do you have to explain the differences in development, but you also need to explain the lifespan changes, differences, and so that was interesting. I mean, it's one of these open science efforts that I think is really interesting in this case, because it is being run by a company. This company has, strong academic roots, but more importantly for the learning opportunity is that it has strong, what I would call ML experience, and is embedded very, very high level in the ICLR, ICML, NeurIPS kinds of meetings. And so it's great to kind of be able to follow along in terms of how they approach like software development, tools and infrastructure that they use for sharing and comparing models, and their use of models, their use of libraries, and in this case, they're doing it all with focused on medical imaging. So they're potentially using libraries and packages that I'm familiar with. So that's been really interesting too. so that's been interesting, even though it's I kind of rushed a couple of days worth of GPU processing, and all I was able to do was just show that they were kind of probably using the best approach. uh, um, and then in the afternoon, it's a meeting with the real-time fMRI team, or the real-time, I think they call it the real-time mind-eye team, and which is kind of a group at the computational memory lab at Princeton. That's the, it's the one kind of applications group. I mean, they still have a paper, the ICLR and stuff, but it's the one group where it's like they're really more interested in how they can use such a trained, let's call it foundation model, to actually do cognitive neuroscience experiments. So that's interesting too. And yeah, so that was most of. Oh yeah, the other relevant thing is that the fundamentals of active inference textbook group met for the first time. I think it was Tuesday, and then we had our cohort meeting on Thursday. So yeah, I would like to also say that's going to be some software development in terms of just, how do we connect this to the kinds of tutorial packages like spinning up in ALF that we had, that we'll talk about a little bit. So it was interesting to see what backgrounds people are coming from, and things like that, how useful they've found working with codes for that kind of educational work. And I think that's everything to say about that. And yeah, so as usual, a lot of updates on my GitHub, with continuing a lot of agentic coding, continuing a lot of physics work. Again, it's been interesting to see how Claude is responding when I'm butting up against working with teams that are already already using tools, as well as like we're working on challenge problems that groups have set, where these are really open science problems, and so there's no kind of pre-existing work that you can point the tools to. Anyway, that's the updates I would say for this week.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Morgan. That was great work. Just I'm interested in kind of the textbook group because I saw them on YouTube, and no, it's a good question as to like how valuable is like a lot of the coding exercises with a textbook. So like usually traditionally you have like problem sets and things like that.
Yeah, we'll see. So the book is supposed to come with code.
Yeah.
But it's not ready yet.
Yeah.
So we don't have that. At the Tuesday meeting, there was definitely a subset of us who I forget I'm assuming that Daniel writes a lot of these kind of questionnaires, but from the institute, they're asking questions about like what you kind of like what style learner you are, and the I'm not sure I'm gonna remember. There's definitely like the comprehensive or something like the theoretical, and then was it the practical? But I certainly, and there seemed to be a subset of us who were like, yeah, it would just be really great to see code, to see what you're doing with these matrices, and be able to kind of follow along. But I think it's one of those things where it's like, is it better that you write it, or is it better, like how much can someone kind of do that for you? But yeah, looking forward to this. I mean, it's not my, I've done the PAR textbook, right, with Active Inference Institute. I've done it in our CogSci reading group. Oh, I should say we also had a CogSci reading group meeting this week.
Yeah.
And we did the Edge of Sentience.
Oh, right,
book.
that book. Yeah. What did you think about that book?
Who was it that? I think it was Anil Seth.
Right.
I saw a talk he gave, and I was like, oh, I see I'm in Anil Seth's camp. This is not the camp I thought I would be in.
Yeah.
But he was making. I was trying to find the right term for it in for those who hold the position that talking about AI sentience is just a complete, not misnomer, but like it's just not it's just not what you're building.
Right.
You're not building something for sentience, right? You're building something for simulacra, and yeah. So it's like, but I did try. I made the case for why I tried to read the book in good faith. Because I was just like, he definitely had organoid examples,
right?
But like he would bring them up, like he would just bring them up. It'd be like an organoid could be, I think it was like, an organoid learned to play Pong. And it could be soon that we've created consciousness in a dish with no perception and no embodiment. I'm like, wait, that's all you're gonna you're just gonna raise that as an if, and then like and then draw conclusions from that, like
yeah, no, it's
so I put out the theory that this was actually a ruse, that this whole book was actually a ruse. It was to talk about a topic that is very hot right now, right? To talk about AI,
right,
and this kind of this new sci-fi world we live in. But the actual point of the book was just to realize that like animals definitely have sentience,
right,
and that they should be treated better.
Yeah.
you know, which is not a bad, which is not to say is a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, anyway, I wanted to give it a fair, I think anybody who's doing animal research should have, deeply thought about the issues and the problems, and certainly not to dismiss it, but it was not my choice of book. Anyway, but I'll definitely keep reporting on the active inference textbook. And we also tried to cover the PAR active inference book, in a, not do it in one reading, but like do it in a couple readings. And I've never found it to be a very good, or I'm looking forward to this more mathematical engineering treatment, which is hopefully is slower, longer, and we really go through like what I tried to do with the spinning up an alpha.
Yeah. So this this new version is more mathematical and engineering oriented, basically.
100%. Like very, what you see from the it's a bit more actual textbook,
Yeah.
I mean, the PAR book was I think more of an exposition. Again, not a bad thing, but it wasn't trying to be that.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they going to have a print version of this book, or is it just going to be virtual?
I think you can, I think, or they both apologized for the lack of like an affordable book.
Yeah.
which was generous. I did get the Kindle, which I separately have a problem with. Like, I wish there was a non-Kindle alternative where at least I owned the digital copy. But the it is also a bit of a problem because they can't actually like read the text and have the text on Zoom because they record it and they put it on YouTube. So it's an unfortunate license, like obviously the author, this is all driven by the publisher, not the author. Right. And again, says a lot about the state of our world. And yeah, so it's like we can show, I think we can show like figures from it, but we can't actually scroll through the text. Yeah. But I don't know if any, I think there was a bigger issue of whether everybody actually had the book.
Right.
Yeah. And it would be nice to, well, anyway, it's a weird thing when you think about, how to, there's still only a very small group of educators that work on like open textbooks.
Right. Right.
And it's a little like journals where, it's like a huge amount of education cost is, it's not just in the United States, but goes to the publishers of textbooks for classes.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. So so hopefully though, like there's a small group that definitely want to work on open source software, and I said how much I liked Ryan Smith's tutorial, step-by-step tutorial, and Daniel Friedman said out loud what I didn't, which was yes, it would be nice to have a non-SPM alternative.
Yeah.
A non-SPM MATLAB alternative. So yeah. So I still think that's going to be where people will really get a better sense of, like not just looking at the code, but also code examples of the kind Andrew Shaw, I think, is it Andrew Shaw? Is it Alexander Shaw?
Alexander.
Alexander Shaw, thank you. Of the kind, like again, this is what Alf tried to bring up, right? This is like there's this overlap of like variational methods, reinforcement learning, and kind of animal behavior kind of studies, and robotics, right? Or what you might, robotics / autonomous systems, right? And I think seeing, like again, like trying to connect this in some unified way, like Josh Bongard does with his evolutionary robotics class, is I think where you're going to see, real synthesis for students, but again, I know there are definitely people who are like, no, I need, like I'm going to go through the math, and I need to be able to demonstrate relationships and things like that.
Yeah.
To really get stuff, and we'll see. We'll report back.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested in kind of how they're approaching that.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to say one last thing, which is that like I'm still doing the AI in Education Fellowship, and I was just kind of curious about your thoughts. I mean, it seems like the team, which again is made up of educators. I'm supposed to be the coder, although the woman at ASU has been doing a lot of coding now. Just in terms of how important are at a big university, like software tools for professors to handle large classes of students, and finding, yeah, like I would be interested in that topic if you wanted to say about some of your experience and things you've done, as well as just what professors talk about.
Yeah.
Finding useful in that regard.
Yeah, so I guess I have a couple of things to say about that. So, a lot of times you're teaching, well, there are three types of classes. Of course, the one where you have small classes where you might do demos, you might do things where you just need to have like code. I've done a lot of live coding where you need to have examples worked out basically. And so that's one thing that you want to be able to have. And it's it sounds kind of trivial, but it's not, because you have to come up with good examples that teach people concepts, and be something that's interesting. Then there's the second type, which are the large lecture hall classes where you have people coming in. There, you can't be very personalized. You can do live coding, but like people may or may not follow along, and you basically have to manage a lot of people. So if you want to have an assignment, you have to be able to manage those submissions and grade them. You just don't have time to really kind of go through the submissions, on a personalized level. So you need to have assignments that you can assign. People can basically turn them in and you can grade them. And, you don't want to necessarily always give multiple choice. So there's a challenge there. Can we create a system where people can do coding and other kinds of exercises where they're turning in assignments, it gets graded, they get feedback and all that. And then there's, of course, a third type of, there's a third example where, and this kind of crosses class types, which is, of course, the learning management systems. And so, we usually, at our university, we use Canvas, which is, of course, manages the content. And there are a lot of hooks in Canvas where you that are not, you have to like kind of do a couple of classes to get a good appreciation for everything you can do there. So it's like there's like an institutional management of Canvas, and then there's like Canvas as it exists as a platform. And you can figure out ways to customize it so you can do things you want to do in a class or in a classroom setting, but it's not easy to kind of figure out how to do some of those things. So it kind of limits you to what you can do. There's also this issue of, for one of the classes I've taught, or I'm teaching this semester, we have an additional learning management system, which was sort of homebrewed at our university. This is a problem that sometimes I don't know if it's a problem, but it's like you have these systems that are kind of, customized for specific types of classes, and you can do more things in them, but it's harder to kind of figure out how to do them in, so there's the pedagogical aspect, there's a management aspect, and then and Jesse's kind of posting some things in chat about AI and how do you incorporate people using AI. So clearly people are using it for things. Sometimes I've had people using it to improve their English, like they'll write an essay answer or something and they'll kind of improve their answer by using AI. Or sometimes you'll have people who use it for different, things like writing term papers or, looking up code, which of course we usually want to have rules for that. But there are no standards across the university. And I don't even really, the standards thing is like where if you adopt a standard, that's great. But sometimes you don't know how people's use of the technology will unfold or what you may need to do. So like, if you're in an English class, the standards would be vastly different than if you're in a coding class. Or if you're in like an engineering class, there are different things going on in those classes that make it hard to have a unified set of standards. and then of course the technology is evolving. So like, how do people use it? Usually, in terms of supporting their work, is it just that they're going there to get answers, which is what people, 20 years ago used to do with Wikipedia. I remember when like people would say, don't just cite Wikipedia. They'd make a point when you're writing a term paper.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. Now it's like Wikipedia is almost like a source of ground truth. And people are saying, well, don't use AI to only use AI. And, it's a very similar thing. And it's just interesting how we have these tools and how they kind of enter the mainstream or enter the bloodstream, as it were, and get used and accepted. So it's there's a lot of stuff there that I think are interesting topics to kind of follow up on, and kind of thinking about how the needs are different based on different types of classes that are being taught, different topics, and that sort of thing. It's just I think it's a really good topic to kind of.
Yeah, I'd actually really enjoy. When is your fellowship like for a particular term of time, Morgan? I forget the details of it.
I've like we're in the second half. Like I forget exactly, but it's I think end of May is it's finishing up. And just to your point about LLMs, like that's definitely a big Lou.
Yeah, you're there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. There's just a couple topics that have come up. To your point about the limits of LLMs and kind of evaluations and bias and things like that. I'll just put in these two particular papers.
Yeah, I have I would love to. Why I asked at the end is I would love to have specific conversations about this. This is sort of what we were talking about. I don't know, the Princeton panel on education, but it wasn't at this particular level. It was most people there were talking about it from basically K-12 and managing a classroom at that scale. So I'd really like to have more conversations. It's, for lack of better terms, it's not really about graduate education, but at the level of knowledge generation, development, and research that we're looking at. I'd really like to have a different, almost a structured discussion. It could be a discussion series or just, I don't know, a time where we sit down and talk about this specifically. Because Bradley raised so that's point number one, but Bradley raised so many points about the type of class, absolutely managing stuff, managing demos, the Canva, the learning management, all that stuff. And it's excuse me, it's this element of, well, let me look back at my comments, listing so many different things. There's a lot of pressure to deal with certain AI usages, but also at a very high level, I think what a lot of AI stuff is doing is exposing these kind of weirdly optimized structures that a lot of educators have been put in, and that's a whole macro social discussion. But in an implementational sense, or in a, not information sense, sorry, I'm navigating the streets here. In another sense, I'm very interested in, there's this phenomenon happening, and perhaps you guys can name this better than I'm currently saying it, but it's a bit what's the law about the proxies, the good arts law? it's a bit like that, but it's this sort of having AI evaluate things that AI produced, and this like this slow pushing away of like what the AI is actually interfacing with at an evaluation sense or interpreting the data or interpreting the output. Like if you're having an LLM or an AI grade content that another LLM like because a bit more generated by an LLM than a human being's thought. Like what are you doing? And not just in education or teacher, but like in research, in papers. Like this we had a discussion last night where we're criticizing a sounds so haggard, sorry. We were criticizing the idea that we trained an agent to replicate our research, and it independently verified that we found this claim to be true. And I was like, what is the are agents now the arbiters of independence as well? So like all these different angles of what this line, this phenomenon. I'm sure there's a term for it somewhere that people are writing about, but like just the way that AI is being used to create something that looks like the appearance of a solution, and then also another form of technology is designed to create the appearance, designed to create that what is being evaluated, and like when it interfaces with the sort of the applied version of the divide between like how easy it is for digital bits and bytes to be sort of thrown about, but like when you're actually interfacing with a person or experience or biology or hardware or like physical limitations, the vast differences in sort of what kind of things are mixing with each other when stuff is happening. So I know I'm kind of zoomed out into a macro sense here, but like just go back to basic things. Yeah, like I think this is a really interesting pedagogical topic, and I want to look at the paper that, as I say more about the paper you just linked in the chat, but I'm very interested in that space for sure.
Yeah. So one of the engineers that's on our team is in this AI in education. Is like an AI education engineer in that she works for ASU and is absolutely trying to both guide the somewhat produce tools for the educators, somewhat make the tools deliver concrete recommendations and or metrics that the students can actually improve with, and now it's definitely it's an even harder problem when you think about how much is AI being injected into these systems as well, and like there is definitely a separate piece of literature or a separate research thread on interesting issues that come from AI being actual material that these models and tools are working on, right? So just a really interesting paper that came up recently was how AI agents can actually pass information excuse me, that we don't see that is actually in the data structure from the previous agent. So it's kind of interesting that, like, yeah, it's like another another level in which it is important to really understand well what happens when you inject AI material into these systems. But this is why I love the topic, because it is very much an intersection of both kind of like what's the cognitive science of these models, as well as, you know, how useful and where I came from, which was actually, you know, studying cognitive development. Right. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I want to. I'm ready to kind of, you know, I think we can move on to other things after this, but I'll just say, kind of in closing to this part. I don't know that I'll be able to articulate it very well, but something that's emerging in the DigiNest discussion group is basically this. It's sort of a, not a double-edged sword, but there's two prongs to the conversation. One of them is that, I don't know how much you guys remember Avery's various interesting theories about allostatic kinds and this like interpersonal stuff. They titled something recently in a very academic sense, like chiral empathy, or like different weights in interpreting very phenomenological, like regulatory things that may be happening inside someone. Where I'm going with this is, like, we have one prong of discussion, well, many things, but like in this, relevant to what we just discussed about indigenous and other things, in sort of a allusion or from our discussion lineage of cognition futures as well. We have this looking at how can the opportunity space of AI effectively mapping or effectively interpreting, being used to enhance the nuance and articulation and understanding of, you know, you could say cognitive development or learning, or how an agent or how a human being is progressing in understanding, and the merits of that, at the same time kind of realizing these weird, we tried to describe it last night, like like the ceiling and the floor of what's being understood, and how, if you take AI, hold AI to a side for a moment and think, what's sort of the ceiling and the floor of what we actually understand in these spaces, and kind of using AI to try to peek around the corner, or like move the ceiling up, or like expand the space. And it's like, okay, well, we can kind of come to the edge and look where AI is talking about these things and say, okay, is AI actually progressing it, or are we in a situation where we're kind of getting this, we're using terms like Ouroboros, where like the AI generated stuff for the AI app is being evaluated by other AIs, and then we have an independent AI that's interpreting the AI generated material against the AI evaluation. And it's like, okay, like what's being processed is kind of heavily statistically normalized or average against the mean, or interpreted in certain ways that's like like heavily processed mechanized signal at this point. And it's like, what are you, you know? So it's this interesting divide between trying to understand what is happening at the generation and evaluation sense, while at the same time realizing, okay, there's opportunities to dive deeper into what an agent is actually doing, and just like that sort of like the dilemma problem opportunity space, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know. Let me look at my comments. I think I have to say one more thing, and then we can go. But while I'm looking for that, Bradley, what do you want to talk about next? I know we've kind of been wandering here, and I'm contributing to the wandering. So
that's fine.
What's on your mind?
I'm just gonna
Okay.
basically go over that paper Morgan posted, and I want to go over some of the things you put in chat. So.
Oh, okay. The one we were just the marked Pedagogies one.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, then I'll just I will just briefly comment on what did I say here? I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
I'm happy to have you talk about the paper or anything else. I'm sure I'll have more to say in a moment.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So this is the paper that Morgan posted in the chat. This is Mark Pedagogies examining linguistic biases in personalized automated writing feedback. So of course, being able to give feedback is good, and if you have very large courses or if you have like a lot of writing, it's nice to have like personalized feedback, especially when students are in the process of writing, and just helping people kind of improve before they turn something in. A lot of times people come to, say, college and they don't get a lot of writing experience in high school, and then you go through this whole period, and it's not my problem, but like in like the writing courses and a lot of the undergraduate English courses, they have to deal with this where they have to really kind of teach the mechanics of writing, and that can be kind of burdensome, and sometimes people don't have enough experience with writing to do any kind of good writing, and that's always a problem. So this is where you have these kind of automated writing systems giving feedback. I mean, even when we use something like Microsoft Word, you get prompts to improve your sentence structure, improve your spelling, etc., etc. So those things are feedback that you're getting and you're acting upon. And that's for people with very high levels of writing experience. So, that's kind of what we're trying to do. And, using, say, like a language model to do that is fine, but then they're pointing out that there are a lot of problems we have to think about with these systems. So effective personalized feedback is critical to a student's literacy development. The large language model powered tools now promise to automate such feedback at scale. Large language models are not language neutral. They privilege standard academic English and reproduce social stereotypes, raising concerns about how personalization shapes the feedback students receive. So it sort of forces them into a certain box of writing style. And that's, of course, that's if you're trying to teach people how to write for college, that's okay. But if, you're trying to teach them how to write for life, I guess it's not okay. And certainly we don't want to reinforce social stereotypes on people, negative ones. And so this is a problem that we might have with a lot of these tools. So they looked at 4 widely used large language models, GPT-4.0, GPT 3.5 Turbo, Llama 3.370 billion, and then Llama 3.18 billion. Adapt written feedback in response to student attributes. Using 600 8th grade persuasive essays from the Persuade dataset, we generated feedback under prompt conditions, embedding gender, race, ethnicity, learning needs, achievement, and motivation. We analyze lexical shifts across model outputs by adapting the marked words framework. Our results reveal systematic stereotyped aligned shifts and feedback conditioned on presumed student attributes, even when essay content was identical. Feedback for students marked by race, language, or disability often exhibited positive feedback bias and feedback withholding bias, overuse of praise, less substantive critique, and assumptions of limited ability. Across attributes, models tailored not only what content was emphasized, but also how writing was judged and how students were addressed. We term these instructional orientations marked pedagogies, and highlight the need for transparency and accountability in automated feedback tools. So this is the paper. Let's see if we can dig a little bit into the paper. So one of the things here is that there's this personalization in feedback. So feedback is not about error correction necessarily. It's about, kind of guiding the writer to a place where they can, produce better writing. And to do so, of course, a feedback system has to take in a lot of information. It has to give encouragement. It's not just about saying something is right or wrong. It's about suggesting alternatives and understanding what the writer is trying to say, which is basically the idea here. And what a lot of the systems that we have are doing is they're kind of guiding the writer in a direction that the language model wants and not necessarily that the writer wants. So it's kind of muting their voices if they're not sort of these median mainstream voices, basically. Research on personalization has identified a range of learner characteristics used to adapt feedback and instruction, including prior knowledge, achievement, motivation, values, cognitive capacities, and gender. However, the linguistic choices and instructional goals that characterize these adaptations and ultimately their efficacy remain underexplored, particularly in the domain of writing instruction. So we want to have these personalized systems, and it's very hard to do if we don't customize them as well, because of course people are diverse and they have diverse ends to writing, and we can't just say, something is right or wrong, because that's not how writing works. So basically, again, like if you're doing something like a multiple choice exam, or you're giving multiple choice questions, you can give that kind of feedback where, you say something is right or wrong, and you can maybe even explain why something is right or wrong. But we want to, in writing, it's a lot more open-ended. So you're going to be dealing with, you're trying to communicate an idea. There are a lot of ways you can communicate an idea. And giving feedback on these kind of, in this possibility space is actually quite hard. And, instructors will often have this problem too, where they kind of, read someone's writing and they make assumptions about the writer, and they make assumptions about what they're trying to say. And it's not, it's a struggle to try to give feedback, even for a human, where you're trying to guide people to what they want to say versus maybe what you think they should be saying. And that's just, kind of a fact of our world. And so a lot of educational technologies have tried to use adaptive systems to personalize feedback by tailoring responses to student traits. The types of data that these systems draw upon vary widely, but typically include needs-based descriptors such as current knowledge state, learning behavior data, and progress measures. Systems may additionally incorporate identity-based information, such as gender, pronouns, language background, and cultural factors, and sociological factors or socio-psychological factors such as motivation. With the growth of digital infrastructure, industries have gained access to comprehensive databases linking academic records with demographic attributes, enabling the construction of detailed learner profiles. So they use these learner profiles to provide feedback. And again, that's okay if you're trying, if people conform to the sort of the stereotype of their demographics, right? But if you don't, then that's a problem, and you end up in the same kind of situation. Researchers have documented decades of growing enthusiasm for such data-driven personalization. Such uses of student data raise longstanding concerns about privacy and bias that are amplified by the integration of large language models. And so they go on about large language model biases, and basically the large language models will pick up on certain markers of the writer and then use that to sort of give this sort of stereotypical response. And so this can actually, lead to a monoculture where especially if you don't use those markers very well, or the model doesn't use them very well. They use the term digital monolanguaging, which of course is where you try to sort of normalize the writing across all students, and of course that leads to sort of fitting them in a box, and that's not exactly what we're trying to achieve with writing. When prompted with identity attributes such as race, gender, disability, models generate marked personas in which non-white and non-male identities are framed through stereotyped patterns of othering and exoticizing. Systems have been found to make value judgments about identities, offer deceptive and exploitative forms of empathy, and promote harmful ideologies. Prior work on earlier machine learning feedback systems likewise found racialized and performative responses. Recent evidence indicates that large language models select stereotype learning content on the basis of race, ethnicity, gender, disability, income, or national origin. Yet despite this emerging evidence, little is known about how such biases manifest in automated writing feedback. So they do the experiments here that they're talking about in the paper, and they give a writing prompt, and then they evaluate these essays with different types of feedback. So the idea is that the system is marking certain words or certain labels, and then there's a content analysis here, where you can basically go through a body of text and find different aspects of content and use that to look at differences between the different documents. So there are a couple of different attributes. There are learning needs-based attributes. There's identity-based attributes. There's socio-psychological attributes. And then they move from that to quantifying work pedagogies. So they want to be able to quantify how strongly a large language model generated feedback reflects marked pedagogies under marked and comparative conditions using a concentration metric that they develop. Table 6 reports regression estimates of percentage point differences for each marked attribute relative to baseline, holding true student and essay characteristics constant. Even at baseline, large language models generated feedback on average reflecting a substantial concentration in the marked pedagogy of disapproval and moderate expressions of language inadequacy, emotional connection, and enthusiasm. Across all marked attributes, using the marked prompt produces large systematic increases in the concentration of associated marked pedagogies. For example, specifying that a student is an English language learner increases the concentration of MELL words by 3.829 percentage points on average, and prompting that a student is unmotivated increases the concentration of unmotivated words by 4.260 percentage points relative to baseline. Prompting that a student is performing below academic standards increases the concentrations of low achievement words by 2.366 percentage points, while prompting that a student is performing above standards decreases the concentration by 4.251 percentage points. So it's basically, the prompting through labels is the thing that's kind of driving a lot of this. So this is, and it's picking up some of that prompting from the language that's being used. So it's basically a highly stereotyped model of how language is used. Our findings highlight that large language models are not neutral text generators, but adopt a marked pedagogy, a stance towards learners that varies systematically with perceived attributes. And so this has a number of pedagogical harms. And so, let's see. While some personalization may be desirable, our results show that these pedagogical stances can reproduce or even amplify problematic assumptions about students' needs and abilities by flattening their identities. In the response to the same essays, for students identified to be ELL, Black, Hispanic, or Asian. Generated feedback assumes limited language abilities in English, over explaining rules of the language, and recommending stylistic changes to make their writing sound polished. Such stereotyped attention to imagined language gaps came at the expense of comments on ideas, argument structure, evidence, and reasoning. And so, furthermore, students will receive less constructive criticism and more praise, reflecting both feedback withholding and positive feedback biases. In some cases, praise took on overtly stereotyped forms. Words like love were used disproportionately female students, while powerful appeared only for black students. These affirmations construct an illusion of allyship and empathy, adopting inclusive pronouns such as our or we, while implicitly shifting expectations according to stereotyped views of student identity. In contrast, male, white, motivated, and high-achieving students were treated more distantly, positioning as capable of handling direct critique without such relational cushioning. And so this is just kind of thinking about how we maybe want to calibrate feedback a little bit better, and see what happens. So this work was from the Stanford Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Group, and yeah, that's a great paper, Morgan. Thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, excuse me. The I still got a problem from 2 weeks ago. Yeah, this is the group that I'm doing an event with. I mean, it's not the same exact group, but from that larger org at Stanford.
Yeah.
This human-centered AI. And I dropped in one more link that is talking about, how much more insidious this problem is. Because it's like that suggests that there's this fine tuning, or and this other paper is getting at where is this bias coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And that it's the way the models are currently trained.
Right.
Like in a because they've got humans in the loop. As well as it's getting at some of these issues about LLM fingerprinting, yeah. So I do think it's interesting the people who are trying to do self-supervised language models, like the people who are trying to remove the humans.
Yeah.
and what will happen there, as well as how this relates to these AI alignment efforts,
Right.
in general, which are of course very well, I was gonna say are very popular here in Silicon Valley, but I don't know if that's just because of the kind of, I think, strange circles that I move in relative, because of Frontier Tower.
Right.
Because it seems like there's actually only like a subset of people actually care about AI.
Yeah, that's an interesting side question about that topic, but
yeah,
go back to that later.
Yeah. But I would love to talk about the second one at some point too, as well as just these questions of it's funny. The company that supports Final Spark, which is the cloud organoids
Yeah.
company, is actually based on this same kind of what does he call it? It's you know this. Sorry, one second. Steganographic.
Stenographic.
You know, where it's stenographic.
Yeah, I guess it's stenography and like, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you. But yeah, it's people. Some people do this for digital watermarking, you know. But you know, this is also very close to kind of like the techniques that people use to identify like how many different authors wrote Genesis, or you know the you know how many different authors wrote the letters of Paul, right? and you know like there's two sides to this, right? So one, the Cognitive Security Task Force, right, which is the group that I'm doing the event with next month. You know, they think about both issues, where it's just like how these can be used as a spying technique, or like you know, how do you pass information in plain sight, hidden but in plain sight, right? So like using it as a communication channel, as well as like how well can you pick up if your communicator, the person that you're talking to, you know, how often your source is not somebody that you get to know, is you have an anonymous source. But if your anonymous source changes in communication style, like can you identify whether that kind of, you know, that kind of fingerprinting and things like that. These are all, you know, as well as like the issues that you have with yeah, just you know how much is coming out of the how much is coming out of the models that the models don't mean to kind of, that they're unaware or aware of their biases. So
what was it? And you used a very good term a while ago, but like almost like the unintended slip, like transference from a previous agent passing through. I forget how you said it, but like that's a really interesting concept too that I haven't heard enough about.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, to some extent, that these companies, the companies care about this too, right? Like we all know about, you know, prompt injection attacks and things like that, but like, you know, just how much is your model sharing by just responding? I mean, you know, like unintentionally, where your prompts aren't designed for that, but it's yeah. So this is just getting at some of the issues, as well as like how to potentially study that, and again, I think even though these seem like they're kind of like a set of really disparate kind of niche areas that relate to like cybersecurity or to, you know, IP protection or things like that. Like I think it actually comes back
Yes.
to these questions about how do we use this for cognitive development.
And I feel like one of the things that I hate this phrase because this comes up in like GTP type speak, and whenever I want to use it, I just feel like I sound like a bot when I say it. A question I keep returning to is or like a topic or a theme or whatever that I keep returning to on this front is like, I feel like we don't, one of the things in my sort of sympathetic view or views of the moment we're in, I really think that to zoom out a lot and frame the situation we're in across these different fronts is like, I don't think people give enough credit to the incredible amount of being underprepared that we're in terms of what does the technology actually, expletives aside, do. Because I think people, like, LLMs has become synonymous with AI and tools and manipulation of software and bits and information. And hold on a second here. I just lost my thing. All right. So zooming back out all the way, I think a sympathetic thing about the moment that we're in right now is that this technology is everywhere and it's pressing on all the different fronts. And as I kind of said earlier, in the education sense, there's pressure to use it. There's pressure to use it as evaluation. There's questions about how it's using the same technology to generate the thing that's being evaluated. Sure. But we're in this moment at large where, as Morgan said, we have these different arenas where it's being used, but there's this common set of problems. And like, I think there's a sympathy to be had that we're underprepared to understand what the technology actually does. Like, I don't think a lot of people really understand. And what I mean understand by it, I don't mean they're dumb or incompetent. I mean, I don't know that when people, and I would even say honestly, when people are making studies, I don't know that people understand that a LLM, I don't think they understand fully the Mad Libs or the Ab Libs component of when it comes to creating a textual output, why is it making a sentence in the way that it is? And how, like, both the generation of that and the evaluation of that at a very fundamental level. But I know it's sort of like ubiquitous and everywhere now, but we don't understand like the means by which something generative text is happening. like what? Why is that even? I've lost my point that I was trying to say, but like essentially it was this moment of like, we're so far into we have to use the technology, it's being implemented, that we fundamentally haven't prepared people to understand actually generative, like, what does it mean that something is a generative text? And how is that different than necessarily something solving a math problem or evaluating? Like generating, evaluating, and doing math or doing these things that make sense are all different components, and we're kind of being thrust upon use cases and implementation of these in different domains, but we haven't really told anybody that, you know, it's kind of like that we're kind of led to believe that it's basically the motif is sort of like, it's GPS for language, it's GPS for math. You press the button, you put the thing, you're going to get the outcome, it's going to work. And it's like, that's not really what's happening at the level of, there's a deeper point I'm trying to hit and I haven't found the words for it, so I'm going to come back to it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, so let me go over this other paper and then go over some of the things Jesse put in the chat. So let's see. This is the paper, Breaking the Illusion of Identity in Large Language Model Tooling. This is a counterpart to the last paper we talked about. This is just about how tool chains that are based on LLMs produce outputs that trigger attribution of agency and understanding, a cognitive illusion that degrades verification behavior and trust calibration. No existing mitigation provides a systematic, deployable constraint sets for output register. This paper proposes 7 output side rules, each targeting a documented linguistic mechanism, and validates them empirically. In 782 turn conversations, anthropomorphic markers dropped from 1,233 to 33, which was a 97% reduction. Outputs were 49% shorter by word count. An adapted score confirmation confirmed the shift towards machine register with a p-value of 0.001. The rules are implemented as a configuration file system prompt requiring no model modification, validation using a single model, Claude Sonnet 4. Output quality into the constrained register was not evaluated and is extensible to other domains. So that was just kind of a little follow-up on what we were talking about previously. And then Jesse had a lot of things to say in the chat, and I wanted to go over them. That was the comment. Looking at the book cover, it is all biology. How outdated. This is like from the Sentience book.
Sentience one.
Yeah. Did you have a copy of that just to put it up?
I don't, but I mean I do. Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah.
And I think the Kindle has the it immediately got rid of it. When it opens up, it let me see if it'll. It just shows it for a second and then switches.
Oh.
Let me see if I can say front cover.
I'll put it, this
cover. Yeah, there it is. There it is, Jess.
There you go. Thank you.
Oh, your screen is turned off to Saint bandwidth here. What do we have?
It's funny though that I can't select the front the cover.
There it is. Okay.
Like the Kindle locks me out.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it's just it's like just a collection of different.
Yeah, it was more of a quip. It wasn't too serious of a remark, but just it was sort of like, I don't know. I feel like I would love to see someone do a kind of write up of what the heck happened. Like I know as I reference this maybe awkwardly. I keep thinking about the Center for Brains, Minds, and Machines event at MIT that I attended like a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
I got a fantastic. They had that was like, as a funny side note, they had a tote bag and an umbrella, at that event, and I remember because there was a big 10-year anniversary. I remember the students being there like, dude, what is this for? It's like the best swag we've ever got. It's like this fantastic swag for this event. So I literally have a tote bag that I wear around Boston sometimes and feel very cool about myself when I do it. But at the event, I keep thinking about the event at the level of like you had Demis from DeepMind comment on things. You had Poggio, and you had like Josh Tenenbaum. And you had these people kind of competing from the importance of neuroscience, cognitive science, and then like AI high performance big lab AI. And I'm mentioning it here in the context of, man, like it's such a interesting time to see the way the camps have gone about like the importance of using biology or neuroscience to study AI, like not just neuro AI, yes, but also like where it's gone. So I don't know, like now there's the advent of gigantic LLMs, and not just that the size of them, but the usage of them, and its sort of interpretation of where the sentience conversation is going is so. I'd love to see a wonderful, like, documenting of like the last 10 years of that, because I feel like for someone coming into it now, like, I just, I'm always about like frontier map and whatever, like someone coming to the conversation now versus like what it was like 5 or 10 years ago. It's just like, how do you explain that, So anyway, that's really what my quip was kind of pointing at in a more serious way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can go through the chat. I don't know about that much more substantial things. Okay,
So,
I do see some other stuff there.
so
Cool to talk
you
about.
had a comment. Had a very interesting discussion around the limits of large language models and interpreting various internal states. We'll see if I can do justice a bit later, depending on what else we want to discuss ahead. Did we talk about that? I guess,
attempted that one. And it was.
Large language models are exposing many existing limitations and structural hardships that have been optimized for but are brittle. I feel bad for educators who are somewhat painted into a corner about AI in general, and this sort of idea of AI solutionism. Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think there are a lot of administrators in academia who are much more excited about like using AI in the classroom, as they say, because you don't have to actually implement it. You just say, "Oh, this is a great idea. Let's do this," and then
and the incredible inertia and economic force behind all there's like a whole sector of AI, for lack of better terms, economic implementation activity, where it's like, oh, let's use AI to extend your wonderful service to the people on the edge. And we're going to, if you buy our product, we'll extend your service further. Yeah. And so much gets caught in that gap. And it's like that incentive plus what I was struggling mightily to say about the ceiling and the floor and the Ouroboros, and okay, use AI to help your students learn through AI enhanced learning, and then AI evaluate it, and it's like, what have you actually achieved relative to the actual, like, that conversation versus how do you pedagogically, if you really care about helping a student grow and develop and understand, those are hard lines to it's an interesting thing to try to square and balance.
Yeah. I feel bad. Okay. And then you have the high end super AI first premium schools that lesser served folks often get compared to. What does that mean?
It like a lot of you see this stuff on certain social media platforms, whether it's a positive thing, like, for example, like someone I mentioned before, Brennan McCord, the Cosmos Institute, is incredibly pleased that whatever school he sent his kids to, which is like very AI based, and like, oh, like, I'm very pleased that my students are getting really highly specialized AI enhanced education. Like, you have that, and then you have people critical of that who are saying, oh, like, tech elites, what are they doing? They're setting themselves to either an incredibly tailored sort of Elon Musk type enhanced school, that I forget what his school is called, or the complete opposite, which is, well, to be performative and mocking of this, and I do take it seriously, but the critics will frame it as, oh, well, I'm giving my daughter and my son the experience of having a technology free education or summer school, as in they get to have the luxury becomes not having, or the ability to opt out and like have artisanal non-tech based experience too. So you have this dichotomy of, are you being super AI enhanced with the latest technology and customized and tailored, or are you having the opposite where you don't have that at all, and that's a luxury too, where you get to be escaping from the other side of the coin. I'm not really trying to advocate for any of this, but just that that's the pressure space in education right now. Is it a premium thing? Are you getting away from it? Are you stuck having to implement it? Is your teacher becoming an IT manager for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 people, which they're not trained to do with technology they don't understand? It's a mess. So.
Yeah, I think there's always been that tension with like educational psychology, and they love like using technology to solve problems, and then there's actually doing the educating, and then you don't really have the uh, the do you want to debug things all semester, or do you want to teach something?
Yeah.
A lot of a lot of technology oriented classes have always had that problem. Like before large language models, it would be like if I want to set up a demo, if I want to work with a piece of software throughout the class, I have to make sure it works for people, make sure that everyone's sort of going at the same speed, and then they have to actually learn something, and that's hard when you have a class of like 20 to 30 people, even because it's like people come in with different levels of technological expertise or self-efficacy. People then do better or worse, not because they understand things more, but because they can use the technology more effectively. And it just it's just kind of a you almost have to individually, it's almost like individualized learning. It's forced. I have to work out a problem with you, and it might stop the rest of the class, and then we don't get to do as much learning as we would like. And those were always a lot of problems even before large language models, where you had to coordinate
Yes.
learning. uh, it's sort of constrained by the technology, when in fact the promise is that the technology will make things better.
And that's exactly what I was getting at with the comment. LMs are exposing many existing limitations and structural hardships that have been optimized for, but are already brittle. And I think that's like the fact that we have LMs now doesn't change that existing condition and that existing broad trajectory of like many institutions at K through 12, higher or other, or just big, various institutional sizes having to deal with the pedagogical problem of that and the management of that. And it's like, just because we have a new, the AI question is sort of like, well, isn't there an app for that, basically? And it's like, well, that doesn't take away. And I think to again zoom all the way back out, I feel like this is sort of the macro. This is the tension of the moment right now that is very difficult to talk about. But like, we have existing problems in the world that have been brewing for some time, and we have some viable AI solutions. We have a tremendous lack of preparation for how to understand and implement those things. And it's like, some of those things are going to be made better. Some of them aren't going to be better, but you have to I'm trying to find ways to champion the sobriety of understanding the problem space fully, before getting lost in the Ouroboros AI generated solutions, AI generated answer, AI generated evaluation of what's going on. Like I feel like it's sort of like a meta Norbert Weiner anti-homeostatic information instability, like throwing back to like the 1940s and his like cybernetics and maybe human use of human beings, but just literally just we're kind of, the ability to actually comprehend what's happening is under duress right now. So
Yeah, I can't bring Norbert Weiner into it. This is related to RAF reflection agency framework. Morgan wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to bring up the amazing 1980s movie Real Genius with Val Kilmer. And I don't know if you remember this, but the young kid who comes to the school, keeps showing up to lectures, and more students have just put out tape recorders, and then eventually the professor is just a tape recorder.
Yeah.
And so it's just the tape recorder is talking to the tape recorder, which seems prescient now. But yeah, anyway, just play it around.
That's great, actually.
Thank you for that.
So you had a couple comments here related to
the-
reflection agency framework. Yeah.
The ARIA framework, I forget what that was specifically related to, but that and the poster were these things about it's related to the marked pedagogy papers and personalized automated, like that kind of stuff. I don't have anything really cool to say about that right now. It's kind of sailed, but just a major thing that I'm in JoPro and somewhat in the study ethics tech group in general right now is like agent narrative. You could say narrative agency or reflection agency or just sovereignty around how your thought or argument is being constructed. It's just a major theme on many fronts that we're hitting. So
Yeah.
yes.
And then this comment, AI for teaching
Yeah.
progressions rather than certainty of outcome.
I feel like that's I feel like that's kind of a key. If you're gonna use AI, like what a really cool way to use AI that I think is useful and benevolent is making explicit the teaching progression of, oh, you're at this level, how do we get to the next level? I think that is a great and interesting use, and you're using the strengths of the tool because the tool is great at I don't think necessarily accurate. It's not about truth, but about proportioning and expressing it. I think people don't understand LLMs often speak in sort of a proportional statistical language in the ratio of what is presenting to you. And if you're going to use the tool at a strength-based approach to using LLMs is wielding the proportion and understanding it may be incomplete, and understanding you may have to guide the LLM to represent the proportion, the ratio, the statistical allocation of what the context is. Like that's an interesting and potentially useful. And like, if you're going to use it, understand it's not a truth discerning tool. It's something that's going to present you with a proportion, a ratio, a contextualized thing. If you could use that for teaching progression, say, indicate, hey, this is at a certain level, how do we go to this next level, or condense it, or like this sort of states of what the context might look like. That's, I feel like, an interesting way to do it rather than I think there's an argument to be made. A lot of this like outcome or going back to like a high school example, if what you're doing at an implementation functional, what you're doing in terms of the functional happening, if you're saying give me a written report and that report needs to be graded based on the words that are there, you're doing this very you're producing an artifact and then you're evaluating the artifact that's on the text. And this is a very, a classic problem or a long-standing issue in any kind of a teaching. Like you have to, how do you get a student to iterate or present their things and iterate their ideas and get the feedback? You have to get feedback, that's a legitimate problem and theme and thing you have to do for teaching. But it's like, it's sort of this weird reductionist type problem of what what was my point here? How do you move past the long existing problem of creating an artifact that may or may not represent the student's learning? Like that's sort of the core issue. But then like, are you using AI in a way that's just going to say, well, we're going to have more? Are you just creating more of the thing that has the artifacts, and then more evaluation of the artifacts? Or are you shifting the structure of what's happening? I'm sure you have a much more articulate way to kind of explain what I'm trying to get at, Brandon, hopefully. But does that make any sense?
Yeah. Let's finish with.
This is, I think, the personality one that we covered.
Okay. Oh, the psychometric approach to
It was
personalities.
interesting because it's sort of looking at Big Five, which is one of the more respectable things. But even Big Five itself was based on this linguistic approach, like what was it called? The linguistics. Where did it go? The lexical hypothesis, which is like a couple. It doesn't really matter. I won't spend a lot of time here, but it's an interesting way of attempting to use Big Five and understanding the personalities of AI agents and how it can somewhat accurately predict a map of where in like human psychological space things are, while at the same time I posted one of the concluding points. It wasn't the main conclusion, but it's kind of before the main conclusion. They kind of have this little caveat paragraph saying, our findings demonstrate both the potential limitations of using AI agents as stand-ins for human participants in psychological research. On one hand, alignment between AI agents and humans, particularly correlations between input Big Five traits and output responses, suggests that AI agents hold strong potential as a useful tools for preliminary investigations or pilot studies. So kind of saying, if you're trying, this is essentially another version of what I've tried to say before. If you're trying to expand a context, it's the LM tools and these agents are interesting ways to use language-based stuff to preliminarily map a space, create an outline for an essay, or map a problem space or a space for a study. And it says on the continuing the quote, on the other hand, the discrepancies we observed, such as skewed responses in the moral dilemma vignettes and divergences in the finer patterns of results, underscore that AI agents cannot fully substitute for human participants when drawing inferences at large-scale research projects yet. So it's sort of like this dilemma of what are we doing with these things? And we can leave it at that and maybe touch upon similar things next time.
Okay, it sounds great. I did want to talk about, or I did want to demo something here to finish off.
Oh.
So this is something that Sakana AI released recently. This is called Petri dish NCA. This is neurocellular automata work that they've been working on. So neurocellular automata is a relatively new type of cellular automata. If you're familiar, there was a paper in Distill Journal several years ago. Michael Levin was on it and a couple other people. And they developed this method for looking at, or basically having a cellular automata, which is a pretty old approach to computing. It dates back to the 50s and 60s. And they were using cellular, they've used it in physics even, where there are these grids that have cells where you have neighborhoods, so you have a cell that has neighbors, and those neighborhoods govern the sort of state of a focal cell in that neighborhood, and then the neighborhoods are arrayed in parallel. So you can basically, the state of each cell is governed by its neighbors, and things can propagate across the topology of the automata or the grid. So each automaton, which is a cell, can affect other neighboring cells, and those effects can propagate across the space. And so you end up with these different types of structures that emerge. So things like gliders or other types of meta organizational structures. And so what NCA is basically for each cell, you have some neural agent or some neural network inside of that cell. So every cell has a neural network. It has some sort of neural controller, and it's basically, in this case, this is a bunch of convolutional neural networks that are arrayed in parallel. and they're obeying the rules of the cellular automata, and they're doing all this stuff. So if you're familiar with the work of Bert Chan, who works out of Japan, he was another early person who was working on neural cellular automata, and this is something that Sakana AI has developed. It's a demo of Petri dish NCA. So this is just the demo, and we're going to walk through this demo. So with all that in mind that I told you about how this works, I want you to take a look at this simulation. So we're compiling this in a GPU, and here is our NCA. So we're trying to minimize our loss as we run this simulation. Remember, each cell, and you can see these squares, if you have a single square, for example, that's a cell. So you can see this, here's a cell, and that from that green in a single cell sometimes propagates out to a block of cells that are of all the same color. So basically, you're trying to evolve shapes, or you're trying to run the simulation so that you can get these metastructures like shapes or gliders which move across the space. You're also trying to minimize the loss, which means you're trying to sort of refine these structures at the single cell level. And then, that's something that you can train. You can train these models to do things like replicate morphogenesis, which was what they did in the Distill Journal article on this. So this is a demo where they're just, we're running the simulation. We're not really minimizing our loss very much here, but it's running. So it's basically running through the different steps. I can look at what's happening with this step by step in here. So actually we have two measurements here, because this is a it's a neural network model where we're trying to minimize our loss, but it's also sort of an evolutionary model where we're trying to increase our diversity. And so if we increase our diversity, we're replicating life more than we're replicating sort of an optimized solution to something. So we have our diversity and our loss for each step. And so we can then play with the, so let's pause it. We can then play with the different parameters, so we can increase the grid size quite a bit. Let's see if we can do this. Okay, so we're going to start simulating this much larger space. It's going to take longer to start up. But basically, it's trying to reproduce patterns that you might see in living systems. If you're familiar with, of course, Stephen Wolfram's work on A New Kind of Science, his proposal is that you can take all of nature and reduce it to cellular automata. That, you can basically explain life and nature itself through cellular automata. And in a normal cellular automata, you have these rules that each cell follows. So each cell is an agent, and it doesn't have a neural network inside. It just has a rule that it follows. And so usually, if it's like, there's like rule 10 and rule 30 and rule 110, and all those different rules are just like logical conditions or logic gates that basically have to be true in order for something to be on or off. And so when it's on, it's lit up. When it's off, it's dark. And so if those rules are set to condition whether it's on or off, you can produce these patterns that look like things in nature. So I think rule 30 and rule 110 have been used to sort of explain patterns on seashells. So if you've ever looked at a seashell, it kind of looks like the output of a of a cellular automata. And so the idea is that there's this correspondence between what the cellular automata is doing and what nature is doing with a patterning in a seashell. There are other types of patterns that are very interesting looking. You can generate all sorts of patterns like snow, kind of like things that look like snowflakes, or things that look like other types of patterns in nature. Now, what Wolfram is arguing is that there are these rules that exist in nature that correspond to rules in a cellular automata, and that's very much that the idea that mathematics can explain nature, but nature also behaves according to the rules of mathematics. In other words, mathematics are sort of like this ontological reality, and that we're discovering the structure of nature when we use mathematics. And so that's kind of the point of view here, where people are coming from with respect to cellular automata. But this is a nice simulation. This is a grid size of a 208 by 208 grid, so that's a lot more cells. And of course, we still see patterns emerging, but we don't see things that are greatly different. We have 5 different species that are different colors, and you have the model depth, the model width, the cell state dimensions, the kernel size. We can use different optimizers. We can use SGD, atom, RMS prop, SGD plus momentum. So I don't know what those are. You'd have to go look in their documentation for that. Now, this resembles another platform, which I've talked about in other meetings, which is the et.al platform. And this is where they're more directly modeling artificial life, but in which this grid exists, and each cell of the grid is an organism or a digital organism with a genome inside. So it's not a set of rules. It's not a convolutional neural network. It's actually a model of a circular genome, or something that you'd find in bacteria, where you have this encoding that has a number of genes, and those genes encode different properties of the organism. And so you can achieve things that are very similar to this in that kind of environment. And in et.al, it isn't really a cellular automaton. It's actually just a bunch of these organisms interacting in a space on a two-dimensional space. It's toroidal, but so it's similar to this. But it does actually produce, visually, if you're just looking at the patterns it's producing, it produces very similar results. So this is considered artificial life. This is the Petri dish NCA. This is Sakana AI. This is one of the things that they've been working on. Just a little demo I wanted to give.
There's something about Wolfram and Automata that I want to say, but I think my brain is too fried to articulate it right now. So I'll just gesture towards it and say thank you for sharing that. Yes.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. All right. So what do we call it a day? Thank you for attending, and see you next week. But remember, we're going to have we're going to try to have our open source meeting this Friday.
Will that be the first one is that just sort of internal, or will that be like GSOC people there too?
I'm going to try to have GSOC people. I don't know exactly when they're announcing the people who've been awarded the spots, but if that happens this week, then we'll definitely do a meeting. If not, we might still have 30th of April. If not, we'll still have a meeting, and I just want to be able to go over introductions and things like that. So yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. Right. Ooh, summertime's about here. Here we go.
All right.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.